Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Ice Sheet Survival series. Last time we left off after a bit of an eventful episode, Cobra spent most of the time alone out on the ice sheet, but also successfully defended the colony against two groups of sappers and a psychic ship. Today we continue right here in the middle of summer, and because temperatures are steadily increasing, we want to turn our two coolers back on. That should be enough to cool the base down to a good -25, -30 degrees Celsius, not super comfortable but enough to prevent any infestations from happening. Since we have also more or less run out of steel, we will now deconstruct some mechanoids. After last episode's events, we have a few of those in our corpse storage room, and the materials, especially the steel we get here, should allow us to rebuild some of our traps. Cobra, meanwhile, spends his time in the kitchen making more pemmican for the Huskies, and those Huskies will likely also be a major challenge in this episode, because all three of our females are due to give birth soon. And some of you requested this in the comments of the last episode, and I have to agree. With our current meat supplies as they are, I don't think we need to slaughter the newborn Huskies immediately. Instead, we'll try to keep them alive until a trader passes by. That way we then lay their fate into the hands of someone else, and of course we also make some money in the process. One more mechanoid remains that I forgot about earlier, and the additional steel is also enough for Cambiar to continue working on the traps. Once we have then run out again, the next building project is already waiting, as we are putting some more flooring down inside of our main storage room. Now, last time I did this I used flagstone, and at this point I have to admit that was probably a mistake. While flagstone floor is indeed very fast to construct, it also does not provide any additional bonuses, unlike the proper stone tiles that we are constructing now. Those have the same material requirements of 4 sandstone blocks per tile, and they are also a bit slower to put down than flagstone, but every single tile gives us a small beauty bonus. And for a large room like this, an entire floor made up of stone tiles can make a huge difference. In the end, it should at least be enough to consistently keep the room only ugly instead of hideous. Now, of course, we could improve things even further by smoothing out the walls as well, but that would drastically increase our colony wealth very quickly, which then in turn affects the size and strength of raids. So at the moment, with only 2 colonists, I don't want to play this too risky. Maybe once we have a third and our defense is a bit more improved, then we could see about beautifying the base further. Cobra is now also hauling back last episode's secret hero, the dead Lynx, who actually played a big part in fending off that first group of sappers. In the meantime, Cambiar is about to finish construction, and as you can see, lots of small +1 beauty bonuses here. Not enough at the moment to really make a big difference, but once we have the remaining space filled and the room cleaned up a bit, then I hope the room will look a bit more presentable. The afternoon then passes by with both of our colonists getting some rest, and so we meet back up with Cobra in the evening. And up first, he needs to change his pants, because his old pair of wolfskin pants have become tattered, and so we'll switch him over to some warm and almost brand new camel hair pants. Time to do some work now. For Cobra that means training the Huskies, while Cambiar is busy with steel production. Our Huskies have hauled a few more steel slag chunks into the base, and well, it's always good to have at least a bit of steel for emergency purposes, so we'll now smelt those chunks down into proper usable steel. While we're doing that, I also want to quickly talk about the recruitment process for new colonists, or rather the failed attempt you saw in the last episode. As many of you have noticed, I tried to heal up the downed colonist that we wanted to recruit, instead of using the alternative option of capturing him. Now, I am fully aware that capturing is the approach that is much more likely to succeed. However, capturing a colonist from another faction of course also comes with a pretty hefty relationship penalty, and since we were not on the best terms with his faction to begin with, I decided to try out the healing approach, in the hopes that maybe he would switch over to us. Now, in between episodes I have done some research, and some of you pointed that out in the comments as well. It seems like it is either impossible or at least incredibly unlikely that this healing approach succeeds, at least if the targeted colonist already belongs to another faction. So in the future we will have to keep that in mind, and maybe we will even resort to the capturing approach if someone spectacular comes along. I have to admit it would fit very well into the overall theme of the series. Now, 2 things just happened, one bad, one good. The bad, Cambiar just came down with food poisoning. The good, we just had a trade ship arrive. And while we can't do much about Cambiar other than to watch him puke his heart out, well, let's do some trading. Unfortunately though, there wasn't really much I wanted here. The melee neurotrainer max serum looked intriguing at first, but then I also realized that I likely never want to see any of our 2 colonists engage in melee combat, so I skipped past it, and since we also have nothing to sell, we can simply continue. And while Cambiar is resting, Cobra makes a few new stones. After all, more floor needs to be put down soon. With Cambiar a bit restricted thanks to the food poisoning, we will also send him back to the research bench now. That way he can be comfortable on a task he enjoys in a somewhat impressive room, which should hopefully be enough to keep his mood balanced, even though he is currently experiencing some pretty intense pain. The research project we're working on, by the way, that is still the Starship reactor, another potential source of electricity in the game, drawing its power from uranium, but in all likelihood nothing that we will build anytime soon, because powering up the Starship reactor always draws in a lot of interested raiders. And at the moment, I don't think our colony is ready for multiple large waves of those just yet. Up next, we then have another trade request from the already familiar settlement of Gutra Mountain. We have done business with them before on numerous occasions. This time though, I think we'll have to pass. Yes, getting several statues, including a legendary one, that would be pretty nice, and I would also be willing to take the Masterwork Animal Sleeping Box, although of course it is not desperately needed, but the real problem here, that is the price. Yes, 21 high explosive shells, that's not even a quarter of what we have at the moment, but in total they sum up to a fairly respectable weight. To cut this short, in order to make this trade we would have to send over both of our colonists, and well, we did that once, but I'm not eager to repeat it. Additionally, while all of those statues are of course very nice, we don't really need them at the moment. Most of the areas inside of a base are sufficiently decorated, and we are more than capable of making our own sculptures. I imagine these 2 would also drive the colony wealth up quite significantly, so in the end this trade might even come back to haunt us. So I think we'll let 19 days pass by and let this offer expire. Maybe they have something better to offer next time. Once again then, both Cobra and Cambiar spend large parts of the day in bed, until in the evening we rejoin Cobra in the rice fields. Another harvest is ready to be brought in, and especially with the Huskies chewing through loads of Pemmican, I would say this new haul of freshly harvested rice cannot come quick enough. As Cobra starts sowing out new plants, we can also see that Cambiar is awake again. His food poisoning has passed, but the fibrous mechanites are still going strong. However, at least now his research work is no longer being interrupted by frequently throwing up. The remainder of the early morning hours then remains quiet. Once again, our 2 colonists spent the subsequent afternoon in bed, and so we once again rejoin them in the evening. And we are doing some belated spring cleaning now. Yes, summer is already winding down, but admittedly our base is a bit of a mess at the moment, and for that reason I have prioritized hauling and cleaning for both of our colonists, who should now spend a good amount of time tidying up the place. That also includes merging a few item stacks inside of the storage room, and that can actually have a remarkable effect, because beauty penalties coming from 2 stacks of the same item, those are now merged into one, ideally making the place look a tiny bit nicer. The cleaning work is of course also doing its part, and just after midnight you can see the results. For the first time in a long while we are nearing acceptable beauty levels. Now the place is still ugly, but I think with a bit of flooring work and some smoothing here and there, we should be able to make things work. Speaking of smoothing, that is also what Cambiar is now doing in the kitchen. As I was reminded in the comments of the last episode, there were still a few unsmooth tiles in there, so let's fix that. It doesn't cost us anything and also makes this place a bit nicer to look at. Randy Random then also improves life out on the ice sheet further by sending a Psychic Soothe our way. Both of our colonists therefore now receive a plus 16 mood bonus, so this should keep them happy for at least the next few hours. And those next few hours then also pass by without any major interruptions. Cambiar stoically continues his research work, while Cobra mostly takes care of the animals, preparing more Pemmican and training the Huskies. For that training session, by the way, I have locked all of the animals inside of the Husky stables. Otherwise, they are running halfway across the map hauling back steel and sandstone, Cobra always in tow, wasting insane amounts of time. Unfortunately, with the added need to periodically retrain animals, this requires a bit of annoying micromanagement from time to time, especially with animals like the Huskies who are used as haulers. On one hand, you want them to move freely and make those long trips. On the other hand, if your colonists have to follow them, sometimes for hours at a time only to get a single training session in, then there comes a point where you don't really gain much. If any of you have a more automated solution to this problem, then I would be happy if you could let me know. At the moment, the micromanagement isn't too bad with only 2 colonists, but of course, as the colony grows, I would prefer a more hands-off solution. After another round of rest, we then have a cargo drop, and with it comes a big relief to our food situation. 23 fine meals are now waiting to be hauled back to the colony, and of course we'll take them gladly. In the end, this only means less cooking work for Cobra. Inside of the storage room, meanwhile, the flooring work continues as planned. We don't have quite enough materials to get it finished in one go, but this should be another big step forward. With something to be hauled, the Huskies are now also being released again, and so Cobra also leaves them be for the moment and returns to the stove. In the late evening then, Cambiar's sleep schedule is starting to normalize, at least somewhat, and while he is resting, Cobra brings the fine meals into the safety of our kitchen storage room. The Huskies don't have access to that, and of course we want to avoid them eating our precious meals. Just after midnight though, Cambiar is already fully rested again, so he continues the flooring work while Cobra starts another round of rice harvesting. Just a short while later, Cambiar is finished and heads back to the research bench, and then it also doesn't take him long until the research project is finally completed. And with that, one of the most time-consuming research projects in the game is behind us. We now have the knowledge to construct a starship reactor, but at the moment we neither have the need nor the materials to do so. However, that doesn't stop Randy Random from sending a group of raiders over to us anyway. We can read here that they are unusually clever and will try to avoid our turrets and if possible also some of our traps. However, that if possible, that is the important part. Yes, we have a sizable group of 14 enemies against us here, but the way we have constructed our defenses, there really is no other way into our base than to walk straight over our traps, and then whoever survives will find themselves in the crossfire of 3 turrets. And all the smarts in the world won't change anything about that, which is why I think we can remain fairly calm here, even in the face of a group much larger than what we have to offer. Still, here they come, as expected, going straight for the traps, but our turrets and our 2 colonists are ready. Let's see if we have to use them. Right, doesn't look that way. That was actually easier than I expected. We even have one straggler here trying to escape through a locked door, so that is another easy kill for us, and with that the raid is quickly defeated. Now, as you might be able to see, 4 of the attackers are down and not dead, and could therefore now be captured and potentially recruited. However, I will spare you the tedious process of looking at each and every one of them, and will skip straight ahead to the unfortunate result that we will leave them all here to die. 2 of the attackers were incapable of roughly half of the skills in the game, number 3 was sickly and also pretty old already, and the only guy I liked skill-wise unfortunately had the slothful trait, reducing his overall work speed by a whopping 35%. So I think we can do much better than that, which is why we will now simply strip the attackers while they're still alive. This makes their clothing a bit more valuable if we eventually want to sell it. It would also allow Cobra and Cambiar to wear it without the dead man's clothing debuff. However, I think our 2 colonists are well equipped as they are. So, early afternoon, once again time for Cobra and Cambiar to head off to bed, while our Huskies already begin hauling. We don't have to hurry with that though. The entire area is roofed over and no longer considered outside, so the items will not deteriorate any further. It is now late evening, and with that we are already in the final hours of summer. The psychic soothe has also ended, and so we can now prepare the base for the rougher months of the year. Our first priority is of course to clean up the carnage, and while we do so we have a lone trader arrive on the ice sheet. Looks like a tribalist to me, so she probably doesn't have that much to sell. Still, after quite a few hours of waiting, she has finally made it over to the base. It is early morning of the first day of fall, and let's see if we can begin this month with a good trade. Right, so as expected, nothing that we desperately need here, but we can sell a few raider remains here, just a few low-level weapons and poor quality clothing items, but just enough to get all 90 silver from this trader. In the meantime, our defenses also look a bit more cleaned up, some of the damage has already been repaired, and all valuable items are inside of the storage room. To do more work, especially around the traps, we need more steel though, so let us once again fire up the smelter. While Cambiar is busy, Cobra already gets some rest, and soon after, with the job finished, everyone's favorite cannibal also goes to sleep. In the evening then, Cobra continues work around the defenses, and then new life is born out here on the ice sheet. Once again, Ruby has given birth only to a single puppy, but of course the little fella is getting a sleeping spot as well as a new name. As usual, I selected randomly from the Patreon naming rights tier, and the name of patron Cal Pereira came up, and with that, Husky Cal now joins our small ice sheet colony. And as promised, we will not send him straight to the butcher table. If possible, we are going to solve this via trade. However, if for some reason that doesn't happen in this or the next episode, then we might have to re-evaluate things. Like I said earlier, both Madeline and Gork will also give birth soon, and I don't think our colony can sustain an even bigger husky population. As you can see, by the way, we have also cleared away the snow in our entrance area in front of the turrets, simply to make moving through there a bit faster. Yes, this would technically also allow our enemies to run past the turrets quicker, but the distance here isn't so big that it would make that much of a difference. The remaining white spots, by the way, that is ice and not snow, that can unfortunately not be removed, and in those few spots the colonist will also still be a tiny bit slower. Now, while we have sun and the solar panels are working, I also think it's smart to shut off the chem fuel generator, because that only wastes chem fuel and produces energy that we don't need. Still, on the topic of chem fuel, we are making some more now. The fine meal cargo drop has put us in a somewhat comfortable spot at the moment. If I'm not mistaken, the next rice harvest should also be around the corner, so we can afford to turn some rice into chem fuel now. After all, we want to be well prepared for when the sun disappears again. With the remaining rice, we will now prepare some more pemmican, because of course we still have 6 hungry huskies to feed. And those huskies will also have something to do in just a moment, because Cambiar's mood has taken quite the hit from being underground too much, so we are now sending him out on a small resource gathering trip, allowing him to deconstruct a bit of ship chunk and an old limestone wall. That will give us steel, components and obviously some limestone, and Cambiar himself will haul the components back while the huskies take care of the rest. Back in the base, it is now time to get our next research project started. And instead of advancing progress on the ship, we are going with something entirely different now. Something that has been suggested a lot lately in the comments. We are now researching Nutrient Paste. This is a quick and easy project that will eventually allow us to build the Nutrient Paste Dispenser, a poor tasting but more or less fully automated solution to feeding your colonists. Before that project gets rolling though, Cambiar first gets some rest, so we can join Cobra, who after making a bit more pemmican once again starts harvesting rice. In the early morning hours then the harvest is being brought in, and Cambiar is also awake again, and we can see the research project is already halfway finished. Quick break in the action then for Cambiar, as we're placing 2 more traps to get our defenses back up to speed. Meanwhile, Cobra has finished planting, and Cambiar can return to the research bench. A bit of a panic moment then in the late afternoon, as both of our colonists are getting some rest, and we are being informed that Husky Biscuit is being attacked by a polar bear. Luckily though, the bear did not hurt him yet, and to avoid that from happening in the future, we will now send all of the huskies back to the stables, and if the polar bear continues to follow, then it should fall victim to our deadfall traps. Right, here we are, polar bear down, Cambiar can now land the killing blow. It was a bit of a waste of resources using 2 traps for this I think, but unfortunately I simply detected the polar bear too late to do anything about it outside of the base. In the end, 70 steel for a risk-free and quick kill. There are definitely worse things that could have happened. With the remaining steel, the lost traps are then quickly being rebuilt, and we can also let our huskies loose again. And while we do, we can also see that Gork's training has been successful. She is now also finally able to haul, so we no longer need to lock her in inside of the stables. Cal meanwhile remains in safety. There is no need for him to be running around. With the traps rebuilt, Cambiar continues the research project, while Cobra is finally doing something with those psychoid leaves. That was a cargo drop from a while back, and we are now turning it into Psychite tea 4 leaves at a time. Now don't get me wrong, I have absolutely no intentions of having Cobra and Cambiar drink that tea. It's simply a bit more valuable than 4 leaves individually, so when the next trader passes by, it should hopefully allow us to make some money. Just before finishing his research, Cambiar then heads off to bed, but just after midnight he's back, and so it doesn't take long until Nutrient Paste is finally unlocked. With that, another research project is completed and it opens up a realm of new possibilities, and while I don't think this is a true completionist playthrough in the traditional sense, I still think we can switch things up a bit and show off the Nutrient Paste Dispenser. After all, it's likely the most efficient way of handling food production. However, before we can have a closer look, another Husky birth happens. This time Gork is the mother, giving birth to a daughter and a son. And once again, the Patreon naming rights tier strikes. The female Husky here will get a name changed to Sunshine with a capital S in the middle. Her brother, meanwhile, will be named Francis, both after patrons with the exact same names. Now temperatures are dropping again, so that means we can turn the coolers back off. And before we start working on the Nutrient Paste Dispenser, let's also quickly finish flooring the storage room. Just a few moments later then, a solar flare strikes the ice sheet, so that promptly ends Cobra's cooking session and will probably also once again not be too healthy for the next rice harvest. Still, no need to panic just yet, we have enough food in storage, and we are also about to make some changes to increase food efficiency even further. However, before we can do so, we need more steel. And with the solar flare, smelting is unfortunately not an option at the moment, so instead we'll go back to good old mining. Cambiar is a professional though, and the steel vein here is quickly depleted. Conveniently enough, by the time he's done, the solar flare has also ended again, and while Cobra and Cambiar are now getting some rest, the Huskies are stocking up the steel reserves. And here we are now with the third and final Husky birth of this episode. This time it's Madeline who gives birth to another female Husky, making it 9 we currently have. And just like the 3 before, this one will also get a new name, and the patron selected for the honors was Pepper Winter. So Pepper, congratulations, this is now your Husky, at least until we find someone to sell her to. Once again then, evening rolls around, and with that it is now finally time to prepare the kitchen for the Nutrient Paste Dispenser. At the same time, we will also slightly increase our dining and research room, simply because the dispenser is quite large and would currently not fit in here anyway. The deconstructing and mining work takes a bit of time, and I have also reinstalled the miniaturization mod, simply because I don't think it's realistic that we have to deconstruct and rebuild the research bench just to move it 3 tiles over. So the room is slowly taking shape, we also have some conduits in place now, time to construct our latest technological marvel. In anticipation of the colony growing in the future, we will also slightly upgrade our table. The old one was also only of poor quality, so the new one made from sandstone here is likely to also slightly increase the beauty of the room. Now, while construction is underway, let's actually also talk about what this Nutrient Paste Dispenser does and why it's so efficient. Basically, the Nutrient Paste Dispenser removes the need for cooking. You stock it simply by putting meat or vegetables into small hoppers that we will construct shortly, and if it has power, the dispenser will then use those ingredients to make nutrient paste meals. All of that happens almost instantly, so whenever your colonists are hungry, they can simply walk up to the dispenser, grab a meal and eat it. Now, arguably the biggest downside of the dispenser is that those nutrient paste meals taste horribly. Every time a colonist eats one, they get a -4 mood penalty from eating a bad meal, which for Cambiar and Cobra will be quite the mood swing from +5 from the fine meals. However, in the grand scheme of things, -4 is really not that much. It can easily be countered simply by having an impressive dining room, and spoiler alert, we are currently building one, so I would say it's not that big of a negative. However, there are also 2 huge positives that we haven't even talked about yet. Apart from making a cook for your colonists obsolete, the Nutrient Paste Dispenser also removes any risk of getting food poisoning, and it creates a filling meal with less nutrition than a cook possibly could. A nutrient paste meal only uses 60% of the ingredients a simple or a fine meal requires, so the dispenser can go a long way towards stretching out your food supply longer. Also, the dispenser does not mask human meat in the nutrient paste meals, so in theory it would still be possible for Cambiar to get the cannibalism bonus. However, that might be a bit tricky if Cobra eats from the same dispenser, because as far as I know we cannot really control which ingredients the dispenser uses for each meal. so Cambiar might end up getting a mood bonus while Cobra eats a hefty penalty, which is of course not an ideal outcome. If you know how to control this any better, then feel free to let me know in the comments. At the moment, I think we will stay away from human meat entirely. Right, so here we are. Things are now looking a lot closer to what I had in mind. Conveniently enough, the Nutrient Paste Dispenser also acts as a wall, so you can store the ugly food items in the hoppers and in the freezer around it, while your colonists interact with it from the other side. Now, we are currently in the process of putting some sterile tiles down, simply because room cleanliness affects the research speed, and for that reason we want to keep this room as clean as possible. Our setup with the two tables on the left and right also works quite well, I think. It shouldn't slow our colonists down too much and still give them a comfortable place to sit whether they want to eat or play poker. As you can see, we have also of course kept the stove in the kitchen, because unfortunately animals cannot interact with the Nutrient Paste Dispenser. Now, there is a way to continuously produce nutrient paste meals that involves pausing the game and drafting and undrafting your colonists, but I don't think it's an intended mechanic, so I'd like to stay away from it. That, however, means that Cobra will still have to make Pemmican for the Huskies, so the stove definitely does not lose all of its importance. Additionally, as I said earlier, the Nutrient Paste Dispenser also only works if it has power, so in the case of a solar flare or something worse, we need to have a backup. Now, our dining room has increased in size, but not necessarily in impressiveness, and we are going to take care of that now by smoothing out the walls, which should give this room a noticeable beauty and wealth bonus. Now, things have gone smoothly up until this point, but now we once again have trouble out on the ice sheet. A sizable group of man-hunting Arctic wolves has just appeared, and honestly, I don't see us winning in this fight. There are just too many of them and we also have more important things to do, so we'll simply close our outer door and let the wolves rage outside. Shortly after then, the walls are smooth and we can switch Cobra and Cambiar over to their new meal plans. And this will be very simple. We will simply disallow everything apart from nutrient paste meals. Up next then, more smoothing work, this time in the kitchen. This room will likely never be the most beautiful place, but we also don't have to force it being hideous. After all, Cobra will still spend a good amount of time here. The cargo drop here then comes at a bit of an inconvenient time. Our base is currently on lockdown, surrounded by angry wolves, and honestly, I don't think 184 smoke leaves are worth the risk. If the wolves calm down and the leaves are still there, then of course we'll grab them. For the moment though, we'll let them be and keep everyone safe. With the smoothing work almost done, we then send Cobra over to the rice farm. As you can see, the solar flare earlier has done quite a bit of damage, but luckily none of the plants have died, and so we should still be able to harvest something. In the meantime, Cambiar has finished work in the kitchen, and so I would say we have once again made some very good progress here. More potentially positive news then coming in the form of the next event here, as we are being informed of a Resurrector mech serum not too far away from our base. Now this thing might be even more powerful than the healer mech serum, because as the name already suggests, it can bring dead colonists back from the dead. However, we also only have 19 days to grab it, and it is currently guarded by 6 enemies. If we take a look at the map here, the location is close by, but it will take us a bit of time to get there, of course. Forming a caravan with Cobra here puts the travel time at just over 5 days, and that is not including the return trip. So I am a bit skeptical about this, and I would once again like to hear your opinion on it. I think there is no doubt about the fact that the item in question is incredibly powerful. However, I also think that this trip comes with a substantial risk, and at the moment I am not quite sure whether or not we should take that. So again, let me know in the comments what you think. Should we go for it, or should we rather focus on things on the home front? For the rest of this episode, we will definitely stay inside of the base. Once again, we have Cambiar make some new steel here, because for the next day I once again have a small defensive upgrade in mind. Nothing spectacular though, we'll simply extend the current setup further. At the moment it's working like a charm for us, but with raids only getting bigger in the future, I think it's never a bad idea to upgrade. As you can see, and also likely hear, the wolves have also wandered off. Only one single animal is still sleeping in front of our base, and to make sure it doesn't bother us any further, Cambiar will quickly go hunting. The smoke leaves, on the other hand, have unfortunately rotted away already, surprisingly fast if you ask me, but then again I think we'll survive without them. Very fittingly then, back in the base we have another trade ship arrive, and it was almost like Randy Random was reading my mind at this point. A bulk goods trader that is exactly what I was waiting for, because as much as it pains me, we are now selling off some Huskies. So Kyle, Francis, Sunshine and Pepper, thank you for your short appearances in this episode. Maybe you find some comfort in the fact that you don't have to go alone, because I think 4 Huskies is absolutely enough for us, and with Gork finally able to haul, we can now sell off Ace. 1 male Husky will be enough to keep our 3 females pregnant, and that task now falls to Biscuit. Apart from the Huskies, we're also getting rid of a few clothing items as well as the poor quality steel table, and our Saikai tea production also pays off as we can sell 23 units here. However, we are also still spending big time in this trade, and will do so by acquiring all the uranium this trader has. Uranium is so incredibly rare that we might not even have some on our map. However, for the ship that will eventually get us off this planet, we definitely need some, so let's buy it while we can afford it. Not all traders have this for sale, and who knows when the next one comes by. All in all, I think it can't hurt to be prepared. And with that, I think we can also slowly start wrapping today's episode up. As a bit of an apology for the somewhat slower pace these last few weeks, I wanted to give you something longer today, but I spent about 2.5–3 days on this, so 30+ minutes that will likely be a one-time thing. However, I think it was an eventful episode full of progress. We gained and lost a few Huskies, we once again kept the colony safe, we completed another research project for the starship, and of course we completely overhauled our kitchen. And I would say that's an excellent point to make the cut. I'm sure new adventures await in the next episode. If you like this one, then of course I would be happy if you could leave a thumbs up, and if you want to support the channel further, then you can either subscribe if you haven't already, or you can support the Pete Complete Patreon and potentially get naming rights for another Husky or maybe even for the next colonist. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.